Welcome to the show. My name is Tahir Kashif. Hauntings, cryptids, and the paranormal are found on every corner of the earth. There's no shortage of stories and encounters with supernatural beings that continuously redefine someone's perception of reality and their beliefs. Every week, I'll be taking you state by state and exploring the paranormal legends of America. I have found a very interesting story that comes out of what is reportedly the most haunted city in Alabama, which is Mobile, Alabama. Our story takes place in 1834, and it is one of the strangest in Mobile's history. The story is one of friendship, love, murder, execution, and a tree. And all these themes revolve around one man, Charles Boyington. Charles Boyington was a young printer. However, he was also described as a vagabond, a gambler, in his late teens when he arrived from Mobile, from Connecticut, and he was seeking prosperity during the cotton boom of the 1830s. For context, a vagabond is someone with no job who wanders from place to place. Charles lived in a boarding house with a man and a fellow co-worker named Nathaniel Frost. The two of them went to dances and balls, trying to fit in with the high society of the 1830s. One evening, Charles met a woman named Rose DeFleur, and the two quickly fell in love. Rose was wealthy, and her father did not approve of his daughter dating a poor man who worked for the Mobile Chronicle. Charles would write her poetry, and the two would think about each other all day. Charles actually thought about Rose so much that it ended up costing him his job. And I'm assuming it's due to, poor production at work that he lost his job over her. In the meantime, Boyington would care for his friend Nathaniel while he was suffering through a bout of tuberculosis. Frost would then help Charles with his rent in return. On the afternoon of May 10th, 1834, Charles and Nathaniel went for a walk. People reportedly saw them together near Church Street. Dang. Charles met a woman named Rose DeFleur, and the two quickly hit it off. Rose was wealthy, and her father did not approve of his daughter, dating a poor man. He saw that as, beneath her. It was not part of the social norm for, the rich to date the poor, basically. In any case, Charles would write her poetry, and he would think about Rose all day, so much so that it cost him his job. But that didn't matter because the two were inseparable. In the meantime, Charles would care for his friend Nathaniel while Nathaniel was suffering through a bout of tuberculosis. Nathaniel was so grateful that he would help Charles with his rent in return. On the afternoon of May 10th, 1834, Charles and Nathaniel went for a walk. People reportedly saw them together near the Church Street graveyard. Charles was alone when he returned to his home around 3:30. And that got people asking where Nathaniel was. Charles was reported to have said, "Somewhere. I'm in a hurry. I cannot wait for him." And he was on his way to the river wharves. He made a stop at a general store to buy a pair of pistols, a dagger, and other items. And at 8 p.m., he boarded the James Monroe bound for Montgomery. As the sun came up the next morning, locals were awakened to see the body of Nathaniel Frost hanging from a tree. He was covered in gashes and blood, and the locals were stunned. The papers declared a murder, and the mayor offered a $250,000 reward for the supposed killer, which in those days was a lot more money than it is now. Charles became the obvious suspect. He was perceived as a desperate gambler who owed money. And maybe, the speculation goes, he killed Nathaniel to cover a gambling debt. So officers raced on horseback to catch the steamship before it left the river. And they found Charles in the ladies' room playing cards when the officers arrested him for murder. Charles was brought back to the Mobile and taken to the city jail. And people were really, really keen on executing him. And maybe this was led by Rose DeFleur's father, you know, who did not approve of Charles in any sense. So Charles's trial was very quick, and it was notable because his lawyers were incompetent, while the prosecution had a ton of circumstantial evidence. So his death sentence, when he was found guilty of killing Nathaniel Frost, his sentence was death. And his execution was to be the same as Nathaniel Frost's, hanging in brutal fashion. Charles was sure of his innocence and he believed that a pardon was in his future, but a pardon never came. So, as he was about to be hung, Charles Boyington declared from the gallows, I am innocent, but what can I do? When I am buried, an oak tree with 100 roots will grow out of my grave to prove my innocence. Boyington eventually breathed his last breath and was buried off the Bayou Avenue in downtown Mobile, Alabama, where today, as promised, the Boyington Oak still stands. So what do you think? Was Charles innocent? I mean, his lawyers were incompetent, his trials were rushed, and people had a grudge against him, specifically Rose DeFleur's father. On the other hand, he had guns and daggers, and he seemed to be in quite the rush to leave town. Personally, I think there's a chunk of the story missing that will be forever lost to history. Staying in Alabama, it's now time to talk about one of the state's cryptids, the Alabama White Thang. And no, that's not me misspeaking or making fun of the southern twang. That is the pronunciation I found in every article referring to this creature. Stories of the White Thang have been circulating since at least the 1930s, though some accounts push its origins back to the early 1900s. The albino-like creature has become deeply embedded in Alabama folklore, particularly the state's northern regions. What makes this cryptid particularly interesting is its regional variance. In most northern Alabama, it's known as the White Thang. But what's interesting is in Cortland, which is located in the northern Lawrence County, residents call it the Slow Thang. And I hope I'm saying that right because it's spelled Slough. So slow or slow, I can't. Anyway, most witnesses describe it as a massive white furried creature standing between 7 and 10 feet tall when it's upright. Its body is covered in thick, shaggy white fur, leading some to nickname it Bigfoot's albino cousin. Perhaps the most disturbing feature is its glowing red eyes, though not all sightings include this detail. What's particularly interesting is how varied the descriptions can be. Some people say it resembles a white lion, others compare it to a kangaroo with a cat's head. The Slow Thing's variant is described as smaller, around 5 feet when standing on 2 legs. As far as sounds go, they're consistently described as unnerving. Think a high-pitched scream like a woman in distress or the cries of a baby. These sounds are often heard before visual encounters and have become associated with bad omens in some communities. Another detail reported by witnesses is the creature's pungent odor. Often compared to a rotting fish, a characteristic it shares with other cryptids like Bigfoot. The dense forests of northern Alabama provided the perfect backdrop for this creature. Specific locations associated with the White Thang include Walnut Grove, Moody's Chapel, Happy Hollow, and the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge. The Big Nance Creek area near Cortland seems to be a hotspot for the Slothing variant, with multiple generations reporting encounters there. Many sightings occur over waterways, suggesting the creature may prefer habitats with a proximity to water sources. The creature appears primarily nocturnal, with most encounters occurring during night or during twilight hours. The remote, heavily wooded areas of northern Alabama provide plenty of hiding spaces, which might explain why the definitive evidence remains elusive despite decades of sightings. And like I alluded to earlier, details on sightings vary slightly. For instance, some people leave out the red eye detail, or they can't quite agree if the head of the creature is cat like or kangaroo like. Some agreed upon details is the idea that this creature moves incredibly fast, or its horrible wailing, screaming sound that it makes. Encounters are rare, but one encounter that I found comes from a Facebook post by one George Brewster. His account reads, "So I've never heard of the Alabama White Thang. Yesterday, around 12:45 p.m., my fiance and I were driving home to Virginia from Florida, and we were driving down Route 431 before Seal, I think it was called. We were both just looking around our surroundings and saw a tall, hairy white thing stand up in a small opening on the woods on the right side of us and take off running. So I had her Google search white tall animals that run on two legs in Alabama, and the first thing that popped up was the Alabama White Thang. And the pictures we saw on Google Images matched exactly what we saw. I feel super grateful to be able to see something like that in my life." Another encounter comes from Linda Pebbles, the mayor of Cortland, and she emphasized the importance of local folklore, recounting stories passed down in her family. She is quoted as saying, "My mother would often share tales of her encounters with the Slothing during the Great Depression. She was just a little girl in the 1930s here outside Cortland. She said she can hear it come through the neighborhood and through the community, scream like a woman or the sound of a baby crying. They lived in a dog trot home right on the Big Nance Creek, and they didn't have indoor plumbing. One night, my mother went to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and on her way back, she said it came right up to her and stood on two legs, and was about the size of a mid-sized person and was solid white. My mother said she froze when she looked at the thing for a couple of seconds. Then the thing turned around and went back into the slough. The slough thing is known for coming around at a time of death. Pebbles remembers a story about a man in Cortland who was sick. He lived in a dog trot style house just like my mother did. He was really sick, and they moved him out on the breezeway to sleep. It was said that the sloth thing would come and sleep under his bed at night and leave just before morning. It never hurt anyone." In an interview, John Rare, known for his YouTube documentary about the Alabama White Thang, expressed surprise at the tales of the sloth thing. That's a new one to me," he said. "I've always heard of the Alabama White Thang, and it was always described as all white and sometimes with red eyes." His YouTube channel, titled John Rare, features 3 documentaries involving sightings of the White Thang. And when asked about how he got into the White Thang, he responded, "We were looking at urban legends in each state, and the Alabama White Thang popped up. And I knew that would be the easiest one to make." While the slow thing is known to come around the time of death, Rare explains out of all the stories he heard, that sightings seem to be at random times and not associated with death. He was quoted as saying, "We did have a lot of fishermen who claimed to have seen it, so there was a theme we saw when interviewing people." Pebbles echoed his sentiment and said that these stories are an integral part of our history, and it's a tragedy that the art of storytelling is fading. We have a responsibility to preserve these stories and keep them alive for future generations. So that's that. And well, speaking of the art of storytelling, I think it's about time I wrap up this story. Join me next time in Paranormal Alaska. All the best. Peace.